Okay, we've talked about the qualifications for someone to serve as president, so let's talk about how somebody gets elected to the office of president. How often do we elect a president? Most people can tell you that it's every 4 years. The term of office of a president is 4 years, so we need to have an election to find a president every 4 years. However, many people will tell you that as citizens, we vote directly for the president, that it's a popular vote, and whoever wins most of the votes wins. This is actually incorrect. It's a huge misconception. We do not use popular vote to elect the president, and citizens do not get to vote directly for the president. Well, then, how do we elect a president? Here's how it works. Let's say we have Vic the voter, and when Vic fills out his ballot, he marks down the person he's voting for. In this case, let's say it's Abraham Lincoln. But he isn't actually voting for Abraham Lincoln. Instead, Vic is voting for someone called an elector who has promised to vote for Lincoln. These electors tend to be people who are very active in political parties and who have done a lot of service and who kind of are bigwigs in the political party. These electors then will travel to Washington, D.C., usually in January after an election, and they all get together. Let's pause for a minute and think about where these people come from and how many of them there are. These people form what's called the Electoral College, which is just a group of these electors getting together to elect the president. And each state has a certain number of electors. We figure out the number of electors per state by adding the number of senators, which is always 2 per state, to the number of representatives, which is based on population, and that gives you the number of electors per state. So each state sends its electors to Washington, D.C. in January to vote for the president. If we do the math right, there's 535 electors that vote to officially elect the president. So they get together, they cast their ballots, most times the way they promised to, and then the president is officially elected. There's kind of an in-between step. There's kind of a buffer, if you will, between regular voters like Vic and the president. Why would we do this? Why do we elect a president like this? There's 3 big reasons for that. The first one is, back when the framers wrote the Constitution, travel was difficult. It took a long time. There were no automobiles, there were no planes, there were no trains. And so there was concern about how a candidate could travel all across the country and get nationally known. Adding to this, there was a lack of nationwide media. No radio, no television, there weren't even truly national newspapers. So again, the framers were worried about how in the world is everybody in the nation going to know who the candidates are. And then there was a bit of distrust of the common people. There was concern that maybe the common people, the people who weren't wealthy, who weren't well educated, might be swayed by a slick-talking politician. So what the framers decided to do was to have people in their communities vote for their leaders, people they would trust to go make this important decision for them. Those would be the electors. And then the electors would go to Washington, D.C. and make that big decision all together. It was thought that the candidates could get to Washington, D.C., the electors could meet them, and then everything would work out. Now, we haven't needed this system for over 100 years, but it's still in place because we haven't changed the Constitution to get rid of the Electoral College. How many terms can a president serve once they get elected? Well, in the beginning, there were no term limits. When George Washington became president, he served 2 terms, and people would have been very happy for him to take a 3rd term and a 4th term. But Washington said after 2 terms he thought that was enough, and he stepped down. And that sort of served as a precedent. Most other presidents that followed Washington would do 2 terms, and then they would stop. However, that trend stopped with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was our president during the Great Depression and World War II. And he felt that he needed to stay in office to provide the continuity and the leadership that would get the U.S. through those 2 great crises. So he was elected to the presidency 4 times. And after that, there was kind of a reaction against that. People were worried that that made him too powerful. So we passed the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution, which limits presidents to only 2 terms. So presidents can serve 2 terms and then they have to stop. That's it for presidential elections, and next we will look at presidential power.